Well, hello there and welcome to the show. Every Tuesday, I get the opportunity to visit with my friend Eric Peters from Eric Peters Autos. And Eric, we never lack for things to discuss. So let me start by asking how you're doing today.
Well, reasonably well. I was able to put some gas in the Trans Am yesterday. I try to keep it topped off at this point just because it's who knows, one day we're going to wake up and there's not going to be any gas anymore because this corner that Trump has backed himself and us into seems to be intractable. He continues to bloviate and bluster and talk about deals and so on. The Iranians are not interested in dealing. So, I think inevitably it's going to probably start up again because I don't think Trump is the kind of guy who is going to check his ego, do the right thing, and figure out a way to declare victory and just put an end to the whole thing.
Yeah, I have to admit, I've let the whole debacle in Iran, and I think it is a debacle because in no way do I see how it connects to defending my freedom or my God-given rights, which is the job for the government is to protect our natural rights. But anyway, I have kind of given up on trying to keep track of where it's going because I know that Trump has his version of what's going on. The press has their version of what's going on. Iran has their version. And frankly, the water is so muddy. I have no idea who to believe, and it's one of those things that it's like, well, really, I don't have a stake in this in the sense that I can do anything about it. So I've tried to attend to other things that are
There's
within
an
my
interesting
my
aspect of
wellhouse.
this, though, that I think more people should stop to think about, which is you've heard that the United States essentially produces enough oil for its own needs internally. So why are we paying $4.50 a gallon for gas? And the reason
Good
is,
question.
among other things, one reason is because Trump has seen fit to export the oil that's produced in this country. Now, how that makes America great again, I don't know. It certainly enriches certain interests. And that dovetails with Trump's constant yammering about how the stock market is great and I don't care about, this is the mentality. And that's, I think, putting the best spin on it. But it's really outrageous because, the whole idea of Fortress America, Island America, we have all these resources. Well, we should be paying $2.80 for gas like we were back in December. We could and we should. We're not dependent on this Middle Eastern oil. And yet somehow we're paying almost twice as much for gas now as we were around Christmas time.
And you alluded to a quote that I saw come up last week from Trump. Someone had asked him, "Well, the American people are suffering, economically. You know, do you care about this?" And his answer was, I'm paraphrasing, but it was, "No, I don't care. I care that the economy's great. I care that this is that." And it just right over his head.
Right over his head. Well, I don't think it's over his head. I think that he just has contempt for us at the end of the day. I think all he cares about is Trump and the donor class that supports Trump. That's it. Either that or he's just in the throes of early onset dementia because it's just such a politically stupid thing for him to say, a catastrophic thing. Imagine being a Republican at the national level. You're going to have to run for office. The ads are going to be out there. The quotes, Trump, I don't care.
Yeah.
It's not my problem. I mean, that's a really difficult thing to overcome. And that's the thing that he gifted to Republicans who are going to have to run in the midterms and going forward.
Meanwhile, the one principled Republican in Congress, Thomas Massey, is facing this incredible onslaught. And, anybody who stands up for him in terms of Lauren Boebert, former Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, I'm trying to think who else, Rand Paul, Senator Rand Paul, there's at least one other. They are facing the wrath of Trump for daring to take up for the one principled guy who has been consistent in his principles. I'd love to get your take. It's primary election day in Kentucky, and I don't know where Massey stands in terms of his ability to take on this empty suit that is being run against him. But what do you think of it?
Well, there are at least two pieces to this, and I think the first is that this shows us the pathological narcissism of Trump, in that he requires servile, obsequious, reverential worship, and anybody who deviates at all from that is instantly a traitor. I mean, it's just astounding. Marjorie Taylor Greene, she's as MAGA gets. If MAGA has any meaning, she supported Trump to the nth degree to get him back into the White House. And then when she expressed some hesitancy about the Epstein stuff, when all of a sudden it went from being, let's find out what's going on with this, we're going to, have indictments, charges, and all that stuff, to it's a Democrat hoax. She said, what? Wait a minute. We were going to look into this. And for daring to do that, for daring to deviate from Trump publicly, she became a traitor in, publicly excoriated by Trump. And the same with regard to Massey, because Massey, like Green, is actually putting America first. He says, why are we in this war? Why did that even happen? And a number of other things that Trump ran on and has now run away from. So now to get to the second part of it, it's going to be interesting to see whether Massey can survive this challenge. There are still, unfortunately, in my view, a majority. It's a dwindling majority, but I think the latest poll, something like 50% of registered identified Republicans support Trump's war. And I don't mean to be like a generational classicist or whatever you want to call it, but there's a cohort of aging boomers out there, who still will put Israel über alles and will go with Trump no matter what Trump does. How many of them are in Massey's state and are going to decide the balance? I don't know. I'm hopeful that there are enough people in the state who are outraged at what's been happening and the way Massey has been smeared and the way they've been essentially pushed and told you must vote for Galleron. Galleron is the American choice. Massey is the traitor's choice. I hope that there's a backlash against that. I'd love to see Massey survive this. If he does, that'll be a bellwether. I think that could actually form the nucleus of a rebuilding of MAGA. If he loses, that's going to be devastating for MAGA.
No, I prefer to take an optimistic approach, and I would like to see that happen as well. Like a lot of people, I just think back to 2 years ago, and the Trump that was running then versus the guy who is calling the shots now. Very, very different things, and very disturbing. And that almost insanity over you're not being loyal to me. Well, excuse me, Mr. President, but they swore an oath to the Constitution, and they swore an oath to be true to the voters who put them in office. It's not about you will do anything the dear leader says. I mean, that's North Korean level leadership.
I mean, it ought not to be. It literally is the cult of personality. In these authoritarian states that we all know about, it was required that you show worshipful respect for the leader. The leader's word was law. And in America, there was a marked distinction that, the personality of the individual was not the thing. It was what the ideas were, what the principles that were espoused were. And if the person deviated from that, well, okay, then that guy has turned out to be kind of a blackguard. He's kind of a hypocrite. He's lying. And that mattered. Now it just seems to be for some people, well, he's our guy. And so whatever he does, you better snap in line, salute, and that's it. I don't understand it. You and I were talking a little bit off the air. One of the things that really baffles me, and I have difficulty understanding this, a large cohort of Trump's support consists of people who identify as Christians. And you've got this guy who erects golden statues to himself and is self-referential to a degree that is unprecedented in American politics, at least at the national level. Isn't there something in the Bible about idolatry?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the Babylon Bee has kind of, they've started carrying water for APAC, but once in a while they get a pretty funny headline. They had one last week about 3 Republicans thrown into a fiery furnace because they refused to kneel before the statue of Trump. And I'm like, I want to laugh, but there's enough crossover here that I also have a bad feeling in my stomach as I read that. Now, it's disturbing enough, what's happening, at the upper levels of the US government. But Eric, help me understand, how is it that so many people can still look for a reason to believe? And you raise a good question. Christians in particular. I'll go back to something somebody said in the 2016 election, and I did not vote for Trump in 2016 because I really felt like we didn't have a very good choice between him or Hillary. But this pastor was asking, what would it take for you to look at this guy and say, oh, that disqualifies him, or I don't think I could vote for somebody like that? How dishonest would he have to be? How blatantly evil would he have to be before you would say,
Sure.
I can't support that?
Yeah. It's a really, really interesting thing. And to answer your question, I think that people generally, and this is not by any means a criticism or a condemnation, I think it's human nature. I think we tend to look for the best in people, first of all. Secondly, when we feel that we're under siege in politics and we hear something, we tend to hope we heard what we think the guy is going to do. That's Trump's genius. He makes vague statements about making America great again, and people hear that and go, "Okay, good." And they then start to build on that in their own minds and think, "Well, that would mean X, Y, and Z." Trump never actually follows through on any of that, but he says the right words. And if you look at effective demagogues throughout history, that's what they do. They energize their followers by letting them believe that he's their guy. He's looking out for them. He's got their interests, and it's very difficult to walk that back. I mean, once you've fallen into the trap, I fell into it. I voted for the guy, and I've been extremely vocal in public about, I'm not omniscient. I made a mistake. I let my thought that perhaps he's learned something. Maybe he's a better man now than he was before, get the better of me, when I should have looked at the stone cold facts about what he's done in the past and based my decisions on that. I mean, in your personal life, would you be comfortable having a friend who serially cheated on multiple wives, who was known to be a fraud in business,
Mm.
and who had credible allegations leveled against him by numerous people about some really sketchy things? You probably wouldn't want that guy in your house, right?
Or if he was protecting or appeared to be protecting people who were accused of unthinkably
Yes.
evil things. And that's the kicker to me. And then, coming back to Massey, Massey pushed very hard for transparency on this Epstein list. And that's really when Trump went nuclear against him. And it's so funny to watch people, try and justify, well, Thomas Massey is the problem, and the problem is he is so consistent in his principles, he can't set them aside long enough to help give the president a win. And
Isn't
I
that
just have
terrible?
to ask, what good comes from setting your principles aside? I mean, assuming you have principles and you've given enough thought that you commit to them, how does setting them aside when it becomes convenient for some perceived advantage really make you a better person? It just makes you, a sellout who's able to tap dance.
Isn't it astonishing? And whatever you may think of Massey with regard to his political positions, it seems like he's essentially an unimpeachable guy in terms of his personal conduct. Nobody has said anything about him being in the Epstein files. No women have come out and accused him of awful things. I mean, he's a family guy. He seems to be, a good guy on a personal level. And somehow, people who at least pretend that they claim that they are in favor of moral things and they don't like all these sketchy bad things, denounce Massey and go with the guy who's got this sordid record, dragging along behind him. I don't get it.
It's a classic example of the difference between a statesman and a politician. A statesman will stand on principle even when it's unpopular, even when it could come at some personal cost, which I think Massey is a great example of that. Whereas a politician will say whatever they need to say to get elected, and they'll do whatever they need to do in order to stay in power. I
Yep,
mean,
and Trump is destructive to a degree that I've never seen before in my adult life. Ronald Reagan said something about like what was the quote? A man that I agree with 80% on 80% of things is not my enemy. So, I mean, by and large, people like Massey and Green, they are in that camp, right? Why would you have a circular firing squad and shoot people who are fundamentally in alliance with you? This is like scorched earth destructiveness, in my view.
so this brings me to a thought that I wanted to share with you and with the audience. Okay, obviously this is upsetting. It's discouraging to see this kind of stuff playing out because it shows that the rot goes a lot deeper than I think most of us imagined that it would. And we're left with this idea of, okay, but what can I do? So there was a thought exercise that Paul Rosenberg shares, and he just asks the question. He says, I want you to think about this. What would you do if everything you complain about, and he's talking about, our would-be commissars, whoever it is, whatever, if all of that were to suddenly disappear overnight, what would you do the very next day? And he says, don't jump to a quick answer. Actually, take some time to process that and think. If all of those obstacles were removed, what is the first thing that I would do on waking up the next morning? And his point is, don't wait for the apocalypse. Don't wait for the, magical, poof, it's all gone to happen. Start working on it today, and you will be doing something productive, even if it starts with small things. I'd like to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it's important to not allow ourselves to be paralyzed, to be rendered comatose almost by the shock and awe, the onslaught, the constant juggernaut of terrible news and fear and dread about what might happen tomorrow. it is difficult to get up in the morning and go through, the motions of your normal day. I have the difficulty. I'm going to make coffee. I'm going to get here at my desk, and I'm going to, work up a new article. Oh, but the bombs might fall tonight. It's like, it's difficult. I mean, it's kind of something out of a Kafkaesque novel, to deal with, but you shouldn't let it paralyze you. You should move forward. You should function, because nothing is given. This is an important consideration. He's right. Rosenberg's right. If you consider the fact that we could die at any minute, even if the world were perfect, you could have a stroke, you could die. You're going to live your life in dread that, this is your last day on earth. I might have a stroke today and that's it for me. Of course not. You're going to be thinking about tomorrow, next week, next month, 5 years, 10 years from now. Nothing has changed in that respect, and it ought not to change.
Yep. There's somebody had pointed this out recently, and it made a lot of sense to me. There are three ways we can categorize what's going on around us. There are settled things, and this would be things that are a fait accompli, done. That stupid remark I made at the meeting, yes, it happened, but I can't roll back time and change that. So you just have to accept some things are settled. The second thing is actionable items. And this would be what Paul's talking about here. Things that we can take action on, even if it starts with something small. We don't wait for permission. We don't wait for the perfect moment. We don't wait for the obstacles to be removed. We start and build momentum from there. And then the third category is the things that are really, truly out of our hands. Now, if you're a person of faith, then it's like, these are the things that I would turn to God and petition him for, this is where I would lean on him to make happen what I believe needs to happen, if that's in his plan. But by making that separation, this is settled, this is actionable, this is out of my hands. Suddenly you remove a lot of the stuff that we probably lay awake at night thinking about that really we don't have control over. And that's just a waste of time and energy.
What's the saying? You probably know it better than I do. God grant me the grace, that prayer.
Yeah.
It's as apt in our circumstances right now as it has ever been. We have to deal with the things that we can deal with, and we shouldn't obsess over the things that we can't deal with, that we have no control over. They want that. They want us to feel powerless. They want us to feel helpless. That is in their interest, because then what? Then we look to them for salvation. Look to ourselves for salvation.
And there's another article I'm going to include in the show notes today. This is from Barry Brownstein. You're familiar with former Senator Ben Sass? Have you heard about his situation? Um,
No, I'm
he
not.
he's dying of pancreatic cancer, and it's pretty awful. He's done a couple of interviews, and the chemotherapy has just wreaked havoc on him. He's got horrible sores and splotches on his face, and it's taken a toll. But he has made a couple of very thoughtful speeches or given some interviews where he really emphasizes what matters most. And um, I would encourage people, don't lose sight of what matters most. Case in point, a friend crossed my mind the other day. I hadn't thought of this guy for a while. It crossed my mind because it's like, I really haven't heard from him for a while. I should reach out to him. Well, I got a text from his wife yesterday, and he is, he's approaching end of life. They put him into long-term care, and that's the stuff that matters. Reaching out to people like that, being aware of the people in your life that could use encouragement or a helping hand or something like that will leave you much more fulfilled and happy than wringing your hands over whatever Fox News is going to tell you next about the latest drama happening, in the
Oh,
Beltway.
absolutely. Absolutely. Do things that make you happy. Do things that make other people happy. Dawn had a friend over a couple of days ago, and this friend has a teenage kid. He's 15. I brought him out to the garage and I let him sit in the Trans Am, and I explained to him, how the shifter works, and I let him push the clutch in, and I had him move through the gears. I'm trying to plant a seed there. And as happy as he was, I was actually even happier. I just doing that made me smile.
Well, it would make me smile too. So if I ever get the chance to meet up with your Trans Am, I hope you'll extend that same courtesy to me, because
Of course.
I would love to run the gears. By the way, we need to touch on a couple of things automotive before we call it a show. Your article, Peak SUV,
Yeah.
really caught my attention. Talk to me a little bit about some of the lessons gleaned in that article.
Well, the saying that history repeats, and that's the preface of the article. And you and I, and anybody who's say over 50, will remember the gas lines and the gas shortages of the 70s, even if only dimly, and the way the vehicle landscape changed so quickly. When we were kids and growing up, it was common for regular American families like the ones that we grew up in to have these big cars, big sedans, big wagons with big V8 engines. That was common. Ordinary people, not rich people, drove cars like that. And then it changed almost overnight because gas got scarce, gas got expensive. And of course, the federal government got into decreeing fuel economy as kind of a sop to deal with that problem. Anyway, we got SUVs were sort of the response to the absence of large cars. Beginning in the 90s, when gas got cheap again, the manufacturers, the car companies started making SUVs. They used to be called 4x4s, and they were a niche market. Some people would get Broncos and K5 Blazers and International Scouts, but they weren't mass market vehicles. They weren't vehicles that people used to cart their kids around in. Well, the 90s rolled around and we started getting the SUV. And now SUVs are hugely popular, as you know. I mean, every other car on the road is a big SUV. Well, in December, it only cost about $60 to fill up a typical SUV with a 22-gallon tank. Now it's over $100. And I think we're going to get to the point where these SUVs are going to start being turned into dealers. You're going to see used car lots filling up with these gas hog SUVs because people can't afford to drive them anymore. And then the manufacturers are going to stop building them because nobody's going to be buying them. They're going to go extinct, in my opinion, just like the big cars have gone extinct. And then the next question is, what then? What comes after? I don't know. I'd like to see there's a second article up on the site. I don't know whether you caught it, about this little $12,000 EV that you can't get here. $12,000 for a little EV that's a perfectly serviceable little car, for driving around in, and it doesn't even have to be a primary car. Given the environment that we live in right now, imagine having a little car like that cost basically nothing. You could park your big truck, your big SUV, and use it when you needed it or wanted to use it. Like I do my Trans Am, I take it out for fun every now and then. I could never drive that car every day; it would kill me. I'd be living under a bridge within a month if I did that. But if you had this little EV, little car like that, it's an alternative and it's a way to bring prices down. But we're not allowed to have it, which is fascinating to me because they tell us we got to have these, you got to have EVs because the climate is changing. It's an existential threat. We're all going to die. Really? Well, if that's the case, why can't Americans have the option to buy a little high efficiency EV like that? I think it answers a lot of questions that ought to be asked.
All I know is if I'm going to die, I want to die happy behind the wheel of my gas guzzling 8-cylinder Chevy Tahoe with a big smile on my face.
Oh, amen to that. Me too.
And I also see it as kind of it's a symbol of defiance now. And okay, Bryan, you want to be defiant? Yeah, because the thought that somebody doesn't want me driving that kind of inspires me. No, I think I will drive it as long as I possibly can.
No, I mean, you're right. People ought to get angry. Again, to go back to the 70s, sure, there were people who drove Mercedes and Jaguars and high-end cars like that. But the really wonderful time about that period was that regular people drove cars that were fundamentally similar. There really wasn't that much difference. Yeah, the Mercedes was a little bit nicer. It had nicer trim and blah, blah, blah. But fundamentally, it was just a more expensive car. Now, we don't get to have nice things anymore. Americans have been pushed and pushed and pushed to now where they're driving these little crossovers with a little, 2-liter engine. And I mean, it's sad. And before you know it, we're going to be like Peking, which, that's what we used to call Beijing, scene from 1970 where everybody's doing the little pedal pedicab thing. That's ultimately, I think, where they want us to be.
Oh man. Well, I always feel encouraged after we have a chance to visit, and I feel encouraged today. But again, I'm going to encourage people, please don't lose sight of what really matters, and don't lose sight of the fact that not everything that's happening at the national level is really the most important thing in your life. And if you can make that distinction and find the things that make you happy, more power to you. Eric,
Absolutely.
thanks once again for joining us.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate it.